ありがとな、親父。あとは任せろ。
How's it going, everybody? It's Yeong here, and welcome to Day 6 of the Final Fantasy XV Countdown Retrospective. Less than 1 week to go, everybody. Less than 1 week. Before you proceed, I highly recommend you check out Day 7, in which I discussed news for 2016 leading up to the pivotal Uncovered Final Fantasy XV event. In this video, I'll be talking about news throughout the month of April 2016, which was when Gameinformer did an entire month of coverage for the game. There is a lot to talk about, so without further ado, let's dive right into it. So last time, we left off on March 30th, 2016, which was when the Uncovered event took place. Shortly after the event, Square Enix launched Final Fantasy XV's Platinum demo that very same day. It was a quirky and a nice little distraction, but there were also those who weren't too keen on the whole young Noctis in Dreamland motif. The battle at the end was pretty badass though. Moving on, the same day, GameSpot released this article in which they shared 15 new things they learned about Final Fantasy XV after having talked to game director Hajime Tabata following the Uncovered event. The article reads as follows. Number 1. The Platinum demo will tie directly into the anime. In the new free demo, players control Noctis as a little boy. He's in a deep sleep and moves through a dreamscape at the behest of a mischievous little creature called a carbuncle. Episodes 1 and 5 of the anime, Brotherhood Final Fantasy XV, will tie directly into this demo story, which explains a major injury Noctis sustained as a child. However, the team stresses that these additional pieces of media are just still backstory. You don't need to watch all of them to understand the in-game events of Final Fantasy XV, though you may want to. Number 2. To avoid shipping Final Fantasy XV as multiple games, the team decided to make the story a multimedia property. It's an idea that evolved over time, Tabata says. That being said, initially I did have an idea of this sort in my mind. Nozue-san joined Business Division 2, and as we communicated and discussed things, Kingsglaive started to formulate. Brotherhood, the anime, is something that we started to develop in discussion with Akio Ofuji-san, the producer. Since Ofuji-san is the marketing producer on Final Fantasy as well, those types of discussions started to really develop. The idea was there from the get-go, but all these projects really developed over time. The initial starting point for Kingsglaive was when we had the idea to really complete Final Fantasy XV within one installment, and restructure everything and optimize it so it would be a story that's told within that one installment, Nozue adds. We really focused on Final Fantasy XV's main game being from Noctis' perspective, about his kingdom and taking it back, and his growth as a king. When we had that discussion, we felt that it would be best to separate out of the story of Regis and make it its own independent piece. Number 3. Kingsglaive's main protagonist is Nyx. He won't appear in the main game. According to Nozue, the team didn't want the feature film to also use Noctis as its main focus. Instead, they chose to portray events surrounding Regis and Luna through the eyes of a totally different character, one that would be completely removed from the events of the main game. Enter Nyx. Final Fantasy has a very unique universe, and the idea with this movie is wanting to bring the story down to a level more easily understood by a wider audience. We felt that rather than make the main character someone who is part of the main story, telling the story through someone who is a few steps away from the core cast allows us to better show things that are happening within the world that are more easily understood from afar. Number 4. Kingsglaive is nothing like Advent Children. Advent Children was meant to be a treat for players hungry for more stories in the Final Fantasy VII universe. Kingsglaive's intended audience isn't just Final Fantasy XV players, Nozue says, which is why the film will launch in summer, ahead of the game's final release. Advent Children was for people who had played the game and know the game, whereas the sole purpose of Kingsglaive is to get more people to get to know the universe of Final Fantasy XV, Nozue says. People who may not know much about Final Fantasy or 15 can get interested through Kingsglaive, which is meant to garner a wider appeal for the game. In that sense, the way we've developed Kingsglaive is closer to that of a true theatrical release. We want Kingsglaive to be an entry point into the Final Fantasy XV universe. Number 5. Some characters overlap the main game and Kingsglaive, namely King Regis, Luna, and Arden. All three play very crucial roles in the story and will have major screen time in both the game and the film. Tabata and Nozue not so subtly suggested that the audience should keep a close eye on Arden especially. Number 6. Regis was redesigned because of the film. When Versus 13 was announced, King Regis looked very different. He was redesigned because of his growing involvement in Kingsglaive. The technology allowed the team to make highly expressive character models, and they wanted Regis to look powerful in battle and regal in the film. We changed his design up so he can really express his stature as the king, or his true nature in battle and as a father. We wanted to hone in on that and up the expressive quality of the character, Tabata says. That was happening on the Kingsglaive side, and to draw on that kingly aspect of Regis, we redesigned and tried to get that image of Regis in the game closer to what was in the movie. Number 7. Final Fantasy XV has a theme song, Florence and the Machine singing a cover of Ben E. King's Stand By Me. The indie rock artist's rendition debuted with the latest trailer of the game, and plays over a montage of Noctis and his friends and family spending time together and battling. It's a surprising choice. Typically, Final Fantasy games that chose to adopt a song to represent them have gone with Japanese artists. Angela Ack sung Final Fantasy XII's Kiss Me Goodbye, Fei Wong, 8's Eye on Me, and Riki Sutekidane from 10. I didn't know much Florence initially, Tabata says, of choosing the artist to represent his game. When we were looking for an artist that had their own unique world in their own right, we wanted someone who would fit the world of Final Fantasy XV. We had a bunch of people come up with suggestions for artists to look into, and among those that popped up, we really felt that Florence would really flesh out the world and make it even more beautiful and bring in new fans and interest to the game. Tabata also confirmed the song will play somewhere in the game, but it definitely won't be while our boys are on their road trip. It's not an appropriate song for a car ride, he says. Number 8. Cell phones, cars, branded camping gear. It seems like Final Fantasy is taking a western slant for 15, but Tabata says not quite. It's more a move to make the game globally accessible. It's not that we were shifting from something so infused with Japanese culture into something significantly Western, he explains. Of course, the people developing the game are Japanese, and to a certain degree, the mindset and culture and the way we grasp things, these elements will definitely be infused to a certain degree in our product. That's why when we're looking at the world setting, we wanted it to be something that anyone from anywhere, from any country, at any age, would be easy for them to pick up and enter to world, and it would be familiar to them. That's why we have so many culture and influences dispersed throughout Final Fantasy XV. We wanted it to be accessible for everyone. Number 9. But like the tagline initially introduced alongside Versus 13, this is still a fantasy based on reality. What's different from Versus 13 is, with Final Fantasy XV, we're really trying to modernize Final Fantasy to a certain degree. We're trying to express fantasy as if it was reality within this world, Tabata says. Number 10. Get comfortable with Arania. You'll be seeing a lot of Arania, the beautiful dragoon in iron armor introduced in the last active time report. According to Tabata, she won't be pushing forward any major plot points, but you will encounter her frequently during the main story and after. Unrelated to the main story, you'll have numerous contact points with her throughout the game, he says. Number 11. Partnership with Rowan clothing line is still in place. When the game was still called Versus 13, Square Enix announced a partnership with Rowan, a high-end fashion brand. Most of the original clothing designs from Rowan are still living in the game. The clothes on Noctis and Regis, and any kind of official attire in the Kingdom of Lucis are all from Rowan. Number 12. Whose dogs are those? Those are Luna's dogs. Number 13. Why does Arden wear a fedora? My exact question was, what is up with Arden's outfit? Tabata said Arden's appearance is all tied back to his personality. Think Kefka's clown outfit in Final Fantasy VI. Arden has a really important role within the main story, Tabata explains. He has his own unique mood and essence. Even within the world of Final Fantasy XV, he's kind of a hard-to-grasp character. But he's not just a little offbeat, he's an interesting and strange character. He is extremely smart and he has an amazing mind. That's why he has an important post within the Niflheim forces. His attire helps to express the type of character he is. Number 14. You will not be able to play as Luna in combat or fight alongside her. Despite her large role in the story, Luna will not be your pal in battle. but the team hopes that people find her lovable and they feel she will appeal to players easily. She will play a huge part in Kingsglaive. Number 15. There will be Mughals, and they're totally adorable. Within reasonable means from the developer's perspective, as well as something meaningful for our players, yes, Mughals will be there, Tabata says with a laugh. As you may know from game development, we are always strapped on time, but we really worked our brains to figure out a reasonable way of incorporating Mughals into the game. So that's about it for GameSpot's article. Next time we would hear of the game was the following day on March 31st, 2016, which was when Square Enix shared via Twitter that the PS4 and Xbox One versions of Final Fantasy XV were running on DirectX 11, with a DirectX 12 PC version in consideration. So there is hope for PC gamers. With March out of the way, let's finally dive into news for April. On April 2nd, 2016, websites Dengeki and GameWatch released articles detailing the interviews that they did with Hajime Tabata, and one of the topics that came up was DLC. According to Tabata, Final Fantasy XV has free and paid DLC planned, adding that the possibility of additional scenario content also exists. 3 days later, on April 5th, 2016, website Siliconera released this article using information by website Hachima to share that according to Tabata, a September 2016 release window was decided all the way back in 2013 when Hajime Tabata became director. It was one of the first things that they hashed out based on time, cost, and resources. That same day, April 5th, Gameinformer officially announced that their May 2016 cover would be dedicated to none other than Final Fantasy XV. As one would expect, tons of new information yielded from the outlet's coverage, with 20 pages worth of material. Website Nova Crystallis did an awesome job in summarizing all of that information through bullet points, so I'm going to go ahead and use their article. The bullet points read as follows. When the team was starting Final Fantasy XV, the brand image wasn't very clear. Tabata believes the franchise can't move forward without setting pride aside. He knows fans still have hope in where the series could go. Tabata and his team at Business Division 2 identified 3 core qualities they believe define the FF brand: challenging the status quo, providing an exceptional experience, and using cutting-edge technology. He thinks Final Fantasy VII was the last game in the series to use all 3 points. Final Fantasy XV is a make or break moment, a chance to bring back lapsed fans and new ones into the fold. When moving to Final Fantasy XV, the game disconnected from Fabula Nova Crystallis. Additionally, Stella from Versus 13 was shifted significantly, and while the team tried to keep as much as they could from the original concepts, they took this opportunity to shape 15 into a full range of imagination. Final Fantasy XV's story focuses on friendship, destiny, and legacy. As soon as you start the game, there is a battle in a location yet to be revealed. This is similar to Final Fantasy II, where you start the game right with a boss battle. It also acts as a tutorial before going into Chapter 1. Chapter 1 picks up right after the opening sequence with Noctis and friends on the road to Alticia. The regalia breaks down in the region of Lead, and the party has to get out and push the car to the nearest station. This is the first area where players will encounter the open world. Early on, Noctis and friends meet both Cid and Cindy, and she tasks them with several quests while the car is being repaired. Fantasy based on reality idea is still intact. At the Hammerhead station, an instrumental version of Neil Young's Heart of Gold can be heard playing in the background. The beginning of the game is said to be heavy with familiar imagery before bending things towards fantasy and wonder. There are dialogue choices in the game that lead to different outcomes. For example, Noctis was able to ask his friends for advice rather than asking for a discount or loan from Sydney. The reward for these options seem to revolve around status bonuses, similar to eating or resting. Combat has improved since the demo. Controls are more responsive, and weapons can be swapped on the fly using the D-pad. Gameinformer saw tabs for swords, daggers, lances, firearms, shields, royal arms, and elemental spells. There was also a category called machines, though their purpose is unknown. Magic spells are collected like a resource and can be recharged at various places on the map. Think Final Fantasy VIII's draw system. The regalia, the car, has a trunk that acts as party storage. You may need to pay money to gas up from time to time, but the cost isn't crazy. The car radio plays remixes of classic Final Fantasy themes, such as Final Fantasy. On your way to a destination, Prompto may ask to stop and take a photo. His pictures can be seen during camp and can be shared on social media. Should you continue to take pictures with Prompto, his photography skills will improve. All 4 of the main characters have special talents. Noctis can fish, Ignis can cook, and Gladio has survival instincts, and all of these can be leveled up by continued play. When you call a summon, they won't always do the same thing. They are entities that exist in the world itself, so depending on the situation, they will do different things. For example, Titan will sometimes run up and hit an enemy. Sometimes he will throw boulders at the enemy, and it's possible he will even give up and leave the battle. They will also act differently in a dungeon than they will in the overworld. The black dog seen in the trailers is a faithful servant. Its name is Umbra. Noctis and friends encounter Niflheim's Arden fairly early on while en route to Alticia. There are 4 quest types for fun, fishing, chocobo racing, main story, monster hunts, and regional quests. Currently, there are over 200 quests in the game, but the team are working to add more. Later on, you can synthesize magic to create more powerful versions like Blizzara. Weapons can also be improved with materials collected in the world and won from battles. The main way to improve yourself, however, is through ability points which accumulate as you level up. You have the choice on how you upgrade Noctis and his companions, like strengthening auto-dodge or teaching them new commands. It's an effort to shape the player's playstyle. Luna is the presence that supports Noctis in order for him to fulfill his destiny. She's also the type of heroine you want to meet but can't quite reach. Tabata has no intention to create sequels or anything out of this. He wants people to purchase the game to be able to enjoy it for a long period of time. That doesn't necessarily just mean additional content, but other things to create an interesting experience. So that's all the information that Nova Crystallis managed to extract, and Gameinformer's magazine article goes into even further details. So if you're interested in checking that out, you can go ahead and do that by subscribing to their digital magazines. In the coming few days, Gameinformer released a few other tidbits of information through both articles and footage. On April 6, 2016, the website released a video interview featuring new information and new gameplay footage of the title. Check it out.
So first, when you start the game, there is an actual yet-to-be-revealed location where a battle occurs. So what this is similar to kind of Final Fantasy II, where you start the game and you go directly into a boss battle. And then right after that, Chapter 1 will begin. Chapter 1 starts where you depart for your journey, and so there will be a quick event sequence that you'll be able to view, and then it'll go directly into your journey. The first gameplay you experience is pushing your broken car, and there's actually a thought behind this. By slowly pushing your car through this world, we wanted the players to get a good grasp of what world they will be adventuring in this game. But then I'm sure people will start to wonder, why do I have to push this car for so long? And so we'll quickly switch the scene. So in the main game, probably just that once where it breaks down and you need to fix it. But with Episode to Sky, we kind of narrowed down to this area where we wanted people to enjoy an experience, and that's why we set it so that the car had been broken down. So a couple of players out there, or several players out there, will be experiencing a broken car twice. It initially starts as just a fun trip, but then all these real-life events occur throughout the story, and the characters also grow throughout the story, and their objectives become clear and start to unravel as they progress. Sorry, I can't speak too much about the story at the moment, but I myself don't think that they would be best buddies or nothing would occur throughout their trip among 4 male friends. So the overarching story of the game is definitely, hefty and serious. And of course, the main character, Noctis, will face his destiny and also grow emotionally within the game, but it doesn't necessarily mean that their road trip and their kind of journey with friends would be grave and serious throughout. It's more natural to have that kind of fun element to it. It's really combining this naturalness with the seriousness and the fun of it all to create this kind of human drama within Final Fantasy XV. And in actuality, when you progress through Chapter 1, where you proceed next is Hammerhead, where you're there to kind of fix your car. After that, what awaits in front of you is a completely free type of world. We always want people to feel that excitement from exploring an unknown world. From the start of the development, we set out to make something that wasn't completely free-roaming open world. We always wanted to ensure that the story and freedom were present. So the technology is definitely built on an open world, but the way we approach this freedom aspect is to not have freedom come first and then us implement the quests that would support the freedom. Rather, we have the story first and then create as much freedom as we can give the player within that story. In the points that connect these stories, we feel that you'd be able to experience more freedom than you will ever have in any other Final Fantasy within this world. Within Chapter 1, there is a resort-like location modeled after a Southeast Asian island. And so there you can kind of stay and enjoy different types of activities like fishing. And so within Chapter 1 alone, you can already experience additional activities aside from the main story. And so that's one of the experiences we hope people look forward to. Yeah, there's quite a lot stored in Chapter 1. You'll experience the freedom, the battles, the car drives, the activities, and also a serious turn in the story. As they've gotten a grasp of this freedom and enjoying their freedom, they hear news of this particular incident that their homeland is now wrapped in. And Noctis comes to the realization of this serious, grave incident that's occurring in his homeland, and that's where their kind of serious adventure begins. And that's what's kind of encompassed within Chapter 1.
Then, on April 8th, 2016, they released an article sharing more details about Noctis' car, the Regalia, and its ability to transform and fly. A couple of things that Tabata noted include that there won't be flying enemies for players to deal with when the car is in flying mode, and that the flying car can be obtained towards the end of the game as an additional challenge. The next day, on April 9th, 2016, website JuVideo released a video interview with Hajime Tabata. The information was all in French, but fortunately Nova Crystallis managed to get a translation. Information worth noting from the interview include that at the time, Tabata didn't have plans for another demo, although Japan did eventually get Judgment Disc recently, that the goal is for the game to remain seamless even when navigating with the flying car, that DLC for the game will serve to extend the gaming experience rather than serving as basic extras, and that if there were to be a PC version of the game, Tabata would go back and perhaps add things they couldn't in the PS4 and Xbox One versions due to hardware limitations. Last but not least for today's video, let's skip ahead 4 days later to April 13th, 2016. On this date, Gameinformer released one final video interview with Hajime Tabata, where he shared some more information about the highly anticipated title and mentioned that Final Fantasy XV is make or break for the series. Check it out.
I mean, since you came on board, you've been talking to a lot of press and fans and interacting with the community. What have those people taught you that you didn't know before about what they want from Final Fantasy XV specifically?
There were several, actually. The first being Final Fantasy was not as known as I had originally thought. So everyone, in terms of the media, consumers, gamers, publishers, developers, they all know Final Fantasy. But in terms of how many Final Fantasy titles there have been or what the latest number is in the mainline game, not a lot of people knew. So a lot of the core fans, of course, know where we are in the numbered series, but others, they would know Final Fantasy, the original game. They would know Final Fantasy VII, and then maybe 10. But where were we at? That would kind of be the reaction that we would get. And so we got the true landscape and current environment of where Final Fantasy stands. And the other thing that we really realized that those who know Final Fantasy, many of them and most of them perceive Final Fantasy VII to be the best Final Fantasy, and then nothing has been able to exceed that particular installment.
Is this just market research that Square does, or where exactly do you acquire feedback when you're looking for it?
That's actually a reality that I personally felt through talking to, gamers, consumers, publishers, developers, first party, or media, and not through market research or anything of that sort. One other important thing that I've been able to feel from a lot of the Final Fantasy fans are that they are disappointed in the current state of Final Fantasy, but also still look forward to or have some hope in terms of where the Final Fantasy brand could go.
Do you feel like you understand that disappointment, or is it a mystery to you to some degree?
No, it's something that I can definitely understand. And the reality is, it's not that the situation is okay or in favor of us. Rather, it is a more grave and serious situation that we had initially thought. That's not purely to say that it's a disappointment in the content of Final Fantasy. Within the disappointment, it also includes things like the long development time. And so there are areas that can be improved upon, and so my hope is to kind of improve upon certain aspects and to gradually relieve that disappointment.
I'm fascinated by your research and your realistic perspective on the brand. Do you find it difficult when you're embedded in this world and you work with it every day to maintain that outsider's perspective?
Maybe it would have been a little bit more difficult for people who have been involved with the mainline numbered Final Fantasy series development for a very long time. That said, Final Fantasy 15 is the first numbered mainline Final Fantasy title I'm personally involved in, so it may have been easier for me to kind of directly take in that reality.
So I'm curious, what do you consider your personal biggest unanswered question about the Final Fantasy fan base and the overall brand? What keeps you up at night wondering about?
So the one thing that's unresolved is that obviously we haven't been able to release Final Fantasy 15 that implements all that I thought would be the resolution for certain things. So in that sense, things haven't been resolved yet. But through communicating with different people, I did start to get a good sense of what people like about Final Fantasy or what they look forward to in a Final Fantasy game and what they're expecting or waiting for. And I'm hoping that Final Fantasy 15 will be an answer to that.
My read of it is there's like a discrepancy amongst the fans where they're nostalgic over games like Final Fantasy VI. I think you also love Final Fantasy VI. And they have so much passion for that, and then they see Final Fantasy 15 and they don't feel like it's hitting those same buttons. And I'm wondering, when you look at Final Fantasy 15, do you see that charming DNA of Final Fantasy VI still in there?
So whether Final Fantasy 15 hits the buttons of those who feel nostalgia for 6, he feels is ultimately how we communicate the game through our marketing and how we're able to really communicate the appeal of Final Fantasy 15 through our communication methods in order for them to get a sense that it will hit the same buttons. And so it's a little bit different from what type of contents we would like to create from a development perspective. And of course, that's not to say there are some important elements from a content perspective. So for example, Final Fantasy VI fans, those who believe Final Fantasy VI is the best Final Fantasy game are always looking for an experience on par with the experience they had with 6 in a Final Fantasy game. That goes for any series, because they have a title in the series that provided them or they felt was the best experience, they become fans. And because they became fans, they will expect an experience that's close to that best experience they've had with the installment and look to seek the same emotionally driven experiences. And so in terms of the latest installment, yes, it is different from 6, and it is different technologically, but that said, they may still be able to experience something that they've grown to love in the past. And of course, we're delivering our content with confidence, so ultimately it's kind of paired together. You know, the way we communicate this as well as the content that actually encompasses the game, those should be thought of as a set in order to deliver the appropriate messaging and appropriate content for people to feel the same types of experiences.
It seems like there's this internal crusade to top Final Fantasy VII. And I wonder if you can talk about how much of a mantra that is for the team, or is that not as centralized a theme as I've got the impression of?
In terms of the team's objectives and goals, topping Final Fantasy VII isn't necessarily a clearly defined goal. But many consumers feel that Final Fantasy VII is, you know, the best in the franchise and something that hasn't been able to be topped. And many among the development team also know that. And so if we don't set out to challenge that, then we can't set out to create the best in the franchise. And so I think that's where the philosophy kind of comes into play. And even from a production and a product standpoint, you know, I feel that there is a lot to learn from that game.
So you talk about all the fans for Final Fantasy VII, and I'm sure they all have varying opinions, but it seems like people love that world, they love the story, they love the characters, and at that time, the technology was impressive. And it seems like of all those pillars that people have loved, it seems like you guys are really tripling down on making sure that the tech angle is what's going to wow people with Final Fantasy 15. And I'm curious, why put so much stock and effort into this incredibly expensive and difficult pillar of the Final Fantasy brand?
Well, kind of going back to Final Fantasy, you know, of course, at the time, the image that they had was that they are an RPG that uses the latest technology. And in actuality, I believe it was. And after that, as an identity of the franchise, we continue to bring up that it is an RPG that utilizes the latest technology. But in reality, was that the case? I'm not sure if we can say so. So with Final Fantasy 15, we want to once again confidently deliver the fact that this is an RPG that we're delivering with the latest cutting-edge technology that we've mastered, and that's why we really want to kind of invest in that and also challenge ourselves on that front. And earlier we had talked about what FF fans potentially seek in Final Fantasy games, and he believes there's kind of two steps to that. The first being beautiful graphics that utilize the latest technology. And then second, an experience that is close to the experience that they had with their most favorite numbered Final Fantasy game. And so in that sense, I feel that it's very important to aim for the latest technology.
So the presentation you gave yesterday, it kind of gave the impression that you consider Final Fantasy 15 a make or break moment for the brand. You think that's accurate, or can you elaborate on how you're feeling in that field?
Yes, for Japan, I believe it is a make or break for the franchise. And if the Final Fantasy brand is on its demise in terms of its numbered mainline series within Japan, then I feel like it would also follow suit globally.
You just have more experience, more research with the Japan audience, that's why you frame it that way?
No, that's not necessarily the case. The Japanese console game market is definitely getting, smaller, and that directly connects to the fact that the demand for consoles and console games are declining. And at the same time, that means a decline in the Final Fantasy IP.
So it's a gigantic game, and you're on the home stretch of development here, and I just want to get a vibe of how you're feeling about it.
We do know what we need to do in order to kind of bring it to the finishing line. So from the development perspective, the only current feeling that I have is that I want to really properly complete the game. In terms of the people that we're delivering it to, we want them to know more and get to play the actual experience as soon as possible, and that's the only kind of sentiment I have towards it right now.
thus concludes all the information that yielded during Gameinformer's month-long coverage of Final Fantasy XV for April 2016. And with that, I would like to end today's episode of the Final Fantasy XV Countdown Retrospective. Thank you for tuning in. To be further updated on all things Final Fantasy, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out!